go. Okay. All right. Here we go. Ready? For the fastest hour of the day?
Yes.
You will make it the fastest hour of the day if you participate, and I have candy to prove. So, good questions, good interactions. Get your choice of candy. So, welcome to Optimizing Technology and People in pursuit of delivering a great customer experience. We're going to run a panel for the next hour, and if you were in the session with Adam Blake this morning, one of the things he stressed was this is not about us talking to you, this is about us having a dialogue. So by all means, ask questions. My job up here is to facilitate. Of course, I've got about a dozen questions, so if you want to take a nap, I'll do my best not to disturb you, and I will ask my questions, but it would be a lot better if you would ask your questions as we go through the panel. And then, as Adam said, you want to have fun, you want to learn, you want to meet somebody new. Who are the new T2 Connect people? Any new T2 Connect people in here? All right, so those of you been here before, these are the folks you got to meet. And then last thing is hopefully to learn something. The whole idea is to share ideas about grappling with technology and balancing it with people. So, I'm Brian Wolf, CEO of Parker Technology. I've got Ann Eskridge, Gabe Mendez, Josh Cantor. I'm going to let them introduce themselves quickly rather than me trying to introduce them, and then we'll get started with a couple of feeder questions, and then obviously as you get ready, you want to interact and ask questions. Okay? Ann, please.
Sure. Ann Eskridge, Director of Transportation Services, University of Washington, Seattle campus. We have about 12,400 parking spaces and about 100,000 people that come to campus every day. Customer service critical for us in our day-to-day operations.
Gabe Mendez, University of Wisconsin-Madison, formerly at Arizona State University, so two pretty big organizations. We currently have 13,000 spaces for 70,000 FTEs, faculty, staff, students, and hospital employees. We also run the hospital garage parking, so that's a nice little bonus twist there.
Yes, whole different animal.
Hi, I'm Josh Cantor. I'm the Director of Parking at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, just right outside DC. We have 40,000 students. We're the largest in Virginia. We have 15,000 parking spaces spread across 3 campuses that are separated by 30 miles or 15 miles in each direction, 7,500 employees. And, also, I'm on the T2 Customer Advisory Board, and Gabe and I are on the IBMI Board of Directors as well. So.
Yeah, so thank you for all of that extra work. All right, so I thought to get started, what I would ask you is, as leaders, how do you set the tone with your organization to deliver a great customer experience? And I'll get you, if I can just, I'll get you started with my perspective. What we've started talking about at Parker is this concept of zero daylight between each of the functional departments. And the glue that keeps us all together are our core values. And so it's really about hiring the right people and then expecting them to do the right things, going above and beyond, having excellence in communication, having a servant's heart, obviously honesty and integrity. So what are your thoughts around how you set the tone from the top?
Well, I consider every one of my staff members an internal customer. So I think I need to behave and be a role model is how I set the tone. How I treat them is going to reflect on how they treat others. How I handle customer service issues, they're going to know about, even if they aren't in on the conversation, an email, or it'll come around somehow. Now, this is what the director said. And so I think looking at all my staff members as internal customers and how do we treat them? Do we give them enough information that they can help customers effectively? Do we treat them with kindness and respect and civility? And if I can't live that, I don't know how, it's a day-to-day example of how do they live that with our customers.
Yeah, okay, great. Kate?
One thing that we do is we try to make sure that we focus on the customer first, with the caveat that we will figure it out for our staff. So we don't want to not do something because it's hard. if it makes sense for that customer experience, then let's do it, and then let's work on improving that process or processes as we move along. So we don't like hearing, well, that's a lot of work for us, so now I gotta do more of this. Yes, get over that for right now. Let's get this out the door, and now let's work through this process. Because unfortunately, unless somebody here is much luckier than most of us, is we don't have the time to develop something over a year or two to get it, right out the door, QA and all that stuff. We're usually forced to do it the next week because somebody high up on the chain is upset about it and telling us to do it. So let's get it done. Let's make it as best of a product as possible for that customer. And now let's make it good for us. I mean, it's going to take us a while, but we have peers that we can talk to. We have technology we can lean on. We'll work on that. So that's one of the things I think we try to do.
Thanks. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, to echo on that, I mean, obviously, we're kind of a service industry, right? And sometimes we get so focused on we have all these rules and regulations, we're here to enforce and this and that. Like you said, at the end of the day, we're here to make sure people can get to work and get to class, if you're at a university, if you're in a city, getting to where you need to be for whatever. And it's sometimes like you have to figure out what works. Like, everything from a faculty member, we had a thing with a geology project, and the guy had a ton of very heavy rocks. Normally I wouldn't let every faculty member just drive into the busiest loading dock, but he obviously has way more stuff than your average person. So I wasn't just going to give him the standard answer of like, oh, it's a 30-minute lot down the street, and he has hundreds of pounds, right? So our job is to be there for people. At the same time though, to make sure that we're doing things in a safe way, right? Every bus I have wants to drive right in the middle of our busiest loading dock because it's right next to our student center, and I'm like, I can't. I can barely get cars in there at the time, so I'm not allowed going to have buses. So, but even when I say no, it's like trying to find a solution that works to meet, whether it's an event, whether it's an individual construction, right? A lot of times it's easy to say, I'm not going to close these spaces, let the construction people, right? But at the end of the day, we're there to make sure that project happens so it can get done in a timely manner and under budget. So I think keeping that focus is important.
One of my favorite phrases came from Don Charlie, who runs parking for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. He said, everybody wants to park under their desk. So I thought that was kind of funny because I think that's true. We all wrestle with people that want to park. There's plenty of parking, it's just not under your desk, right? Okay. All right, so then when you think about introducing new technology to your operation, how do you prioritize which technology to pick and what's the order? What's the thinking process around introducing new technology? And I'll let Gabe kick it off.
What do I not have to ask permission to do? That's usually the first one. What can I just do and nobody's gonna say anything? Yeah, I don't have to go through general counsel, I don't have to go through PCI compliance, I don't have to go through purchasing necessarily. If it's something I can just do, we'll do that. I mean, that's usually the easiest route that I found. Beyond that, then it's, we have to go through a business process, make the business case, let's figure out the steps and go through that. But to me, if it's easy enough, like since we're here at T2, if T2 can brand it for you, they can sell it to you, and it's something you want to do, it's an easy mechanism for us to sole source that option. And I've done that plenty here at UW and at UW-Madison, UW-Washington here. At ASU is where we sole source, a product that's not even a T2 product, so we can use it. So it's being able to work within and around the system.
So do you have a recent example where you did something like that?
At Madison, not yet. Actually, at ASU, we did Parker Technology was one of our solutions that we implemented. I think we've also are looking at like LPR. That's probably our next one that we're probably gonna do something with Genentech or somebody like that. So.
Okay, Josh, how do you prioritize what technology comes in first and how to get it done?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has priorities, and sometimes you have bosses that hear about some great parking product, right? Because they know more than all of us parking professionals, right? And come back, but I think it's about what what your needs are. Like a good example is, you know, what people are always like, oh, we want to have real-time space counting signs in all the parking lots. And I always go down that path. Then pandemic happens and the volume of parking demand drops by 40%. I can land a 747 in some of the parking lots at times. So why would I go spend money for what you can clearly see? So I think prioritizing based on what the needs of the customer are, but I think you have to balance it with what you as an organization are able to do. We recently went through a transition to virtual permits, and it was a lot of work, and we had a very detailed plan over 8 months, but there was so many other projects, and I was like, this is our priority right now. So you have to be fair to your staff, and your resources. Like Gabe said, if you can get stuff done without going to other departments, great, but if you're gonna have to, you need to get on their roadmap as well. Like, while parking may be important to a university, right? IT has other priorities, right? Not making sure the university is not being hacked on a daily basis is probably more important to them than how someone pays for a parking, session in a parking garage. So, I think you have to kind of do that politicking, I think, to get people ready to be on your side long before you're actually ready to execute a project.
Yeah, okay, that's good. What do you think, Kim?
I like that question. So we use kind of 3 pretty simple things to evaluate to bring on another technology. Is it but the first 2 have to do with pain. Can we ease the pain of our customer and make it easy for them to do business with us? Can we remove pain points for our customers? Can we better their transactional ability with us? The second is that, and this can be a win-win, these might compete against each other. The second is it gonna be easier for staff? Is it gonna reduce the back office burden in terms of whatever we're experiencing relative to bringing on this change? Now, I like what Gabe said in that sometimes you have to work harder to get better. And so you have to go through a lot of pain to make it easier on the back office piece, but if I can get a win-win of it's gonna be easier for our customers and it's gonna be better in back office, I'm willing to pay a lot of money. And so, but the third piece is, how much is it gonna cost? And cost doesn't wag the tail of the dog. That works with our mascot, and so cost isn't the determinant, but certainly I've gotta look at cost. But if I know I'm gonna get a big win in terms of, let's say, labor savings with back office effort, well, it might be worth the cost because I'm gonna have legacy savings in the way of labor. But really, customers first in that equation. It's like, they hate doing business with parking. I mean, the 3 things people are supposed to hate on campus: hate to park, hate to purchase, and hate to deal with personnel issues. So it's hard to be in one of those 3 painful P's.
Yeah.
So if we can make it easier for our customers to do business for us with technology, we like that.
Yeah, okay. Any recent examples? I didn't ask you that, Josh, so I'll come back to you.
Well, it's actually a recent example that we're trying to work on now. All of our systems inside of T2 are automated except for one function, and that is our pay-per-use parking. And so pay-per-use parking, if you're in pay-per-use parking already, you can automatically renew. But getting you into pay-per-use parking versus our other permits and how we sell parking is very cumbersome. So we know it's gonna be a lot easier on our customers if we can automate that function, and it's gonna be way easier on our staff. So that'll be a win-win. And it may cost us some programming dollars to get there.
Right, okay, that's a good example. Have you got a recent example of where you chose a technology?
Yeah, like I said, we went through the transition to virtual permits, and and it probably started years ago. Kind of preparing campus that we're going in this direction. Many of you all collected as much information from a lot of you all on how this was going to work, but once you got into the thick of it, it was like, ooh, now, like, if you didn't notice, I probably asked a lot of questions to many of you all on C-Parks. I'm like, all right, now I'm in the middle of trying to figure out how to make this happen, and and the hard part was we had a goal in mind. We also had a deadline, we need to either launch by the start of the fall or you're gonna wait till the spring semester. And it was that realization that you're not gonna be perfect. We did have to make some hard decisions on technology and said, what are the priorities, right? Instead of wasting time on how we're gonna solve the problem of 100 swim parents, my focus was on the 40,000 students that are buying permits. Yes, I wanna solve all these other issues, but I wasn't about to let these kind of side things and these smaller things get in the way of our overall mission. And that was hard because we spent, like anything, you spend more time discussing the minutia of things and all that, and sometimes we had to step back and say, let's just table that, like let's table that till spring semester and that. And so I said, again, back, I think focusing on who the majority of our customers are. And yeah, I spend, like all of us, we spend every day figuring out what's wrong, and a lot of it's not always that it's wrong, but you realize that your communication, as good as you think it may be, it's not getting across to people. You know, I had a graduate student who wrote the president today, and she was upset. She said that we were tricking her. She was using Park Mobile, and she was being tricked because she kept running out of time and getting ticketed. And I'm like, well, you know, we chose Park Mobile because it had, you know, it's an easy, you know, function to use. Thousands of people use it every day on campus. It has a, you know, it tells you when you're running out of time, so you don't have to run back to the garage. Like, we think it's easy, and I'm like, and she's a graduate student, so I'm like, where did you go to school that you didn't deal with parking issues for 4 years, right? It's possible she went somewhere maybe, but presumably she dealt with something. So, like, trying to get it, but it went to, you know, it's easy for me to say, you know, I don't get why you can't do this simple function, but part of me was like, what are you trying, like, what are you struggling with? And then it led to a discussion of like, she's paying $20 a day to park in our most expensive garage and complaining about the cost of it. And I was like, there's 10 other options that are considerably cheaper. Do you know about that? Like, you know, do you understand what your options are? Do you know that you have a permit option if you're here every day versus paying daily parking? So again, it gets back to that, you've got to serve your customer, and sometimes it's a game of 20 questions to get to the heart of like what their situation is, because what works for one person isn't necessarily works for the next.
All right, so that sounds like a pro tip where you're prioritizing the largest block, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe, particularly if the technology's hard and it's new, the exceptions, you sort of parking lot them, no pun intended, so that you can focus on the masses first and then sort of trickle it out. Okay, all right, so Josh, you sort of almost took us there around my next question, and that is, okay, so now we've got the technology piece. Now you got the people side of it. And it's not just parking people, obviously, the parking people have to know, but you've got a bunch of constituents that you're trying to communicate with, and you're trying to understand the best way to communicate to them, and the best way to understand, get a feedback loop going when things are not going as well as you'd hoped. So you talked a little bit about it, but maybe just keep going on sort of the feedback loops, and then the efforts that you're making to get into the community, the parking community, so that they know that the change is coming and how far ahead you go.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I learned a lot, I mean, this is probably one of the biggest changes, you know, we've done in parking operations since going to like online sales, is that having an effective communication strategy was critical, right? We could implement the most perfect technology system in the world, but if people don't understand how to use it, it's worthless. And where it really helped us was we got our Office of Communications in our division, not parking people, involved in it. You know, and their job, so they spent time with us understanding what we're trying to do, and then kind of translated it to communication, right? So they probably have a better feel of how to get across to the masses. And so like they became our champions. You know, they laugh that they probably learned more about parking than they ever wanted to know, but they understood our level of detail and translated it into a way that customers could understand. And we're so much more effective than anything we could have done internally, you know, through, you know, beyond just like their social media outreach was a lot more than ours, right? I mean, but like just the videos they did and everything they put together for us, you know, really a true marketing campaign. It was really impressive to see from, you know, I mean, we spend a lot of time, right, writing emails and doing things and signs, and we think we know how to communicate, and we communicate in real time because we need people to do things. But to see people that are professional marketers take your product and really implement it was so I'm all about like, if you don't have a marketing team, find a marketing team within your organization, get a third party, but it's night and day the difference they can make in trying to implement a change or a program or a technology.
Yeah, that's great. How many of you have marketing and or outbound in your departments, or do you have dedicated people in your organization?
We have both. So we have internal folks that focus on our marketing, and then we have UW facilities, and the UW facilities marketers reach all the way up to the president's office relative to internal institutional marketing. So it's both.
Yeah. right, did you have anything?
Same, pretty much the same.
Okay. My experience has been that those that have internal resources are really thoughtful and consistent and dogmatic about the communication have the best luck, and those that don't struggle.
Yeah, and one thing I learned also is that, you know, typically, right, people in parking, transportation, we probably know more people on campus than just about any organization, just the nature of what we do. Taking advantage of all those relationships, you know, I mean, I reached out, any organization, any meeting I could be at, any newsletter I could be in, right? I mean, it was not shy about like, we have something important to get across, and instead of just maybe relying on our true and tried ways, really going out and getting people to help us be our champions was really important to that. So it wasn't overwhelming to people because they supported what we were doing, and in return were willing to, you know, be our champions as they communicated it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else with thoughts about outbound marketing? Yeah, go ahead.
We have a parking advisory committee, which I find is a really great avenue to sort of bring changes in advance, to get feedback from students, grad students, staff, faculty. And because a lot of times we'll go to run, roll out something we think is pretty common sense, and nobody has any idea what it is. So doing that consulting in advance gives you an idea of what the pain points will be and then how to communicate a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Where are you?
University of Manitoba.
Okay.
Campus.
All right.
So, go ahead,
So, Jeremiah, we're working on State Science University. So, one thing that I just kind of wanted to get a feel on is we do have a problem sometimes with not necessarily the marketing side, but the communication side, especially with like our form or our generated letters that go out. Because I will take full on this one. People who program tend to be a bit drier. You know, IT people tend to be a little bit drier, more factually oriented. So, not necessarily get that full customer service, you know, maybe software understood letters going out. Do you usually go with like potentially reach out to other groups, get some feedback on before you say create a new thing? Anybody tried like AI, like ChatGPTs or anything like that as a starting point, or what do you do?
So I say we're lucky here at my last job where we had somebody internal who was a communicator. So we have our communicators draft the language for us, and then our programmers put that into our letters in the format that we need them to. So that's great. But knowing that not everybody has that, I think Josh is probably a good example where you reach out to your campus communication group if you have one on campus. If not, it might be worth it to spend a little bit of money to have a consultant of some sort, English student maybe as an intern, just somebody else who is a professional in the writing. Because I'm there with you. It's like I can write and tell you how to do something, but you may look like I'm telling you what to do, not informing you, right? So.
And I also learned that, you know, you talked about, is that, you know, while the focus was on our customers, you also had to make sure that your staff clearly understood it, like, better than, right? If you're writing it and your staff can't understand it, right, what hope do you have that your customers are gonna understand it? So, you know, I learned that, like, and you know, sometimes you get this, like, look, just make this happen, right, attitude, but you get in this, like, we wanted, every time you had a question, bring it up. We used the Microsoft Teams throughout the whole thing. It was great, because it was like a never-ending conversation. So somebody would be dealing with the customer, like, all right, how do I deal with this in this new environment, right? We'd all be able to respond in real time and assist the customer at the same time. The staff is all learning what our new expectations are, or how to handle it, or things of that sort. And I was like, that level of interaction behind with the staff was amazing, because, you know, otherwise, like, if we talk to the staff, they don't talk to all of them all at once. So to have that framework to do it was really instrumental.
Yeah.
So that rings the bell for me. Giant yellow highlighter. We take all our messages to our sales and administration group, and we say, what's right with this, what's wrong with this, and we do, Zoom iteration. You know, hey, you forgot to talk about the motorcycle parkers in that garage. You totally forgot about the motorcycles that park there, or that doesn't make sense to the people that call into us. So they even take the messages and then create FAQs for how they're all gonna do that, but we miss things all the time, even though we think we know it all. And doing it with the sales and administration group as a part of the regular iteration of our messages helps. And then because we use also outside of our facilities folks, it's like they're always saying, what do you mean? and we have to rewrite it. And so it's worth the time. And it usually is, that worth the time means like another hour and a lot better message going out.
So sales, is that like a function internal to Washington? Sales and administration?
Well, it's one of our business units inside our parking operations. So we have
Oh.
sales and
Oh, got it.
administration,
Okay.
we have
All right.
transportation maintenance,
Yep.
yada, yada, yada. I can
Got
list
it.
them all out. But
Yep.
our sales folks that handle all the incoming
Yeah, for sure.
permit cases, it's like if they think our message is crazy, they will let us know.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Oh,
Cause they're
so they help.
they're on the front lines.
So I'll also
Exactly.
add, and kind of circle back to what Cameron said too, is we're also lucky in the sense that we have probably about 6 shared governance groups on campus at UW-Madison. So we have a campus transportation committee, which is set by the faculty senate. We meet with them once a month. We also have the student transportation board, which is set by the student government. And these are essentially statutory. They're passed down from the state. Then we have our regular, probably what we all have in the universities, our faculty senate, our faculty folks, our campus, like academic folks, and then our university or classified staff. So if we make a big procedural change, we'll go through to each of these groups and present to them and get their feedback before we move forward, because we want that outside perspective. And then we also, like I said earlier, are lucky that we have our own internal communications team. We also have one within our division, which is facilities, and our campus one. So if we have some higher level type of communication or press requests, media requests, is we have a process now where we have a group that gets into a Google Doc or Teams session, and we go through and we write it, then they tear it apart, and they try to read between the lines, and then we can go through and come up with a cohesive message that then goes out to this, whoever it is, the newspaper or the reporter, and it's, a campus-backed message, so we're getting that feedback from everybody. So that's a great thing. I think, Tanara's in her group has worked really hard on cultivating those relationships, so that's been great.
How many of you all have the ability to do mass communications, like to your entire organization, city, et cetera, about stuff? Do you send it out yourselves, or do you have to work through like a central communications group?
We have a communications director that works for Park and Transportation and Administration, so it's a little bit of both. So she sends out, we send our messages, she kind of posts them, makes them sound nice, and then sends them out.
Fluffs it. Actually, I've seen it more often where you're trying to defluff it as much as fluff it, because it makes it, you've got acronyms all over, you've got parking words in there, and they're like, what does that mean? Don't give me a parking word, give me a normal word, right? Anyone else have pro tips around communication or their ability to send internal communications to the entire campus? That's a loaded gun, isn't it? It probably has to go through
So
several.
we used to be allowed to send all student, all staff emails, they canceled that, so now it's just a newsletter and nobody reads it. They read the headline maybe, so it's a real challenge to communicate. We can go to the permit holders direct, that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We use the, flex email, and we have a marketing team. So we do both, and it's pretty good, because everyone is getting all the information, either one way or the other, especially students, they don't even get it. But if you send it to their phone, they're gonna automatically, this is that. So both of those are great for us.
Okay, so I heard Teams here. Do you use a tool internally to communicate?
Well, just Teams meetings and Zoom meetings relative to that, Google Docs if we need to in terms of having, or SharePoint in terms of having something in the same place or space. And it sounds silly to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway, maybe it'll sound archaic. we just wrestled to the ground our voicemail system. In terms of us being able to change voicemails other than like for inclement weather, for when we have serious parking or transportation issues on campus, so that when literally thousands of people call in, they can get the message up front, without having to talk to a human being. And it was an enormous amount of work for us to be able to get kind of plug and play messages other than one or the other for snow.
Tanara, we can do that, right? We can update our voicemail or our pre-message pickup. But we used to have to go through IT, and now we can do it
That's right.
internally.
That's exactly where we're at too now.
Nice. All right. How about, can you go outbound as well? Like, I'm thinking about, there was a company in Indianapolis called Reverse 911 where they could actually go outbound on voicemail communication. Like, I'm thinking about weather and or closures of the garage.
Do like a weather alert, you'd get like
Yeah.
Amber Alert?
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, but no. So campus, and I think a lot of campuses have this, it's an alert system
Yeah.
that PD manages, and they only push out Clary level type of messaging in that one.
Yeah. Okay.
We'd like to be able to set up a text, the ability to send text, but that's ways down the road. In terms of being able to do short text blasts on
Yeah.
critical campus information.
Makes perfect sense. Okay. So now, how do you, as you roll this technology out and you're rolling it out, you've got parking, you've sent the communication, how do you identify people who are struggling? Are they yelling at you, or is it obvious, or is it subtle? And how do you manage that? And you laugh.
As in, because it's all of the above, I think. I don't know, for me, I think for us, it's usually the people who don't get it are gonna be the ones that call right away. So
Yep.
you'll be able to find those simple, oh, duh, we should have pushed this button instead of that button, or we should have used red instead of green, like it's those simple, quick ones. But some of it, I don't know, you don't figure it out until you get somebody who down the line says, oh yeah, I heard Brian had problems with this, like, okay, then we look and, oh yeah, there was 80 of these errors or something like that, then you figure it out, then we fix it. But usually right away, people are gonna tell you something doesn't work.
I mean, I think you have to use one of the things we talk to our staff is every interaction you have, whether it's in person, on phone, by email, is a chance to educate your customer
Yes.
on what you need them to do, what their options are. So even the worst offenders, right? The person that writes you and talks about how terrible parking is, and you look at their record and they don't have a permit and they've gotten 9 no permit citations. You would think the normal person after getting caught twice would go, I probably shouldn't do this, right? I'm not getting away with it. But still, like, you have to step back and take out the emotion and go, okay, again, ask that game of 20 questions. When are you here? How often are you here? Try to figure out what their best option for you. Because the reality is we don't have those opportunities to talk to the masses most of the time, right? A lot of us can talk to incoming freshmen at orientation or transfers, maybe sometimes new faculty, but the reality is we're touching very few people out of tens of thousands of people. So, like, to take that opportunity to get across in a profession, and most of the time they're like, okay. Now most of the time they don't respond, right? If they know they're dead to rights. But that, I said never lose that opportunity to educate somebody. Look, if they continue to do something stupid after you've tried to, you can't be responsible for that, right? And you have to be, but you don't want to just blow them off and say, well, they don't care, so I don't care.
And just want to jump in on that. My pet peeve with our staff is when you don't answer the question somebody asks you in their rant, because then that just escalates them even higher. Like, yes, they've got their 30 citations. They don't like to pay for parking. They're going to ask you a question and then complain a little bit more, and then we just turn around and respond back, sorry, appeal denied, or you need to park where you're supposed to park. You did not answer the question. And that's like one of the big things that we try to tell them is answer the questions.
Yeah.
If you answer the questions, we'll get to Tanara and I at some point, we can handle that. Like, it's easier for us to handle that when we've done everything we can. Is when we don't answer your questions, that's usually when we have to be the bad people for our staff and be like, yep, you know what, we're gonna give you a freebie of some sort. We're gonna do something to make this right. Where if you would have answered the questions as a staff member, I have no problem backing you up and supporting you, because you've done everything from a customer service perspective. You just can't ignore that or forget it, because a lot of people just want to make that point, right? Especially on our compliance side. We're gonna point out what you did wrong, and I'm gonna move on.
So, Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is every complaint, if you really believe this and grasp this, it's true. Every complaint is a chance to educate. Every complaint. And then I usually follow it by this with, kind of tongue in cheek. And it all pays the same. It all pays the same. Meaning, I think we think of complaints as interruptions in what we do. And it all pays the same. It may not be fun, but that's what we're getting paid.
Well, how often are they surprised that an actual human being responded and cares about them, right? I mean, responded.
Right.
Like, even if they didn't like it, right? But they're almost shocked that we actually care, right? And that we actually took the time to
You're not
respond.
heartless.
But I think,
Yeah.
Taking their money,
I think it's a
right?
real paradigm shift to talk about dealing with complaints, not as interruptions, not as they don't get it, not as ignorance, not as they're trying to poke us or get at us. It's like, it's all a part of what we do.
Right.
And if we can normalize complaints, I'm not talking abuse, in terms of ugly things that folks do or say, but seeing it as just a part of the seamless part of what we do rather than, oh my God, I'm gonna have to explain this.
I mean, Cam, I know you have a session about mental health, but we talk about that people are dealing usually with a lot of things, right? Sometimes what they deal with in the parking is just either pushes them over the line, right? Like the lady, the graduate student I was talking about earlier, that she dropped in the we're paid less than minimum wage, blah 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 blah, right? But it's like they're obviously under a lot of stress. We know that, especially for college age students, that the number of the mental health crisis. I know our counseling office, they're seeing 3 times as many students as they did just a couple of years ago, right? There's so much. So we said is, yes, it's important that we enforce what we do and we and set the rules, but at the end of the day, we're here to make sure they're successful in their education. If you're an employee, that they're successful, and we don't need to be the ones that push them over the edge, right? And that's a hard, right? Because again, sometimes you're like, these are the rules, right? And sometimes you can do things in a way, it's like I said, it's sometimes like talking to kids, right? You can tell them they're wrong and slap them on the wrist, but still have them come away with a good feeling that you're not heartless about it, But on the other hand, you brought up when you get abuse, so I think is it important that, especially as a leader, you do draw the line and say that this is unacceptable, no matter how bad your personal situation is. It's never an excuse to, say something, curse something, certainly violence or anything of that sort. So you do have to sometimes teach people. Sometimes people, like I had a boss, he was like, your email was really mean. And I said, good, I got my point across, right? Like it was, to a department that plays basketball. And and it was just like, we bent over backwards and then they were just disrespecting us. And I just said, no one else is willing to stand up for our employees. And Ann was talking about, and we've said, I don't need a 6'9", student athlete yelling at, our 5 foot tall enforcement officer. They're the ones in the wrong in the first place. Even if they had done nothing wrong, it's not an excuse. And I said, you have to step up for your staff, and draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. So I might argue, and the original question I asked about how you set the tone, that your guiding principle around take every opportunity as an opportunity to educate
Absolutely.
really resonates with me, because we just talked about sending campus communication and nobody's reading it, but when you get a one-on-one interaction, changing minds one mind at a time. Is Melissa Scott in here somewhere? So I had breakfast with Melissa and the Old Dominion folks, and 2 things really stood out. She also took this. She's in appeals, and so she automatically gets all of the really difficult cases, right, where people are appealing. And the first thing she said, she literally, I can't remember if she said lectures, but she was like, I take the opportunity, I take the time to really make sure they understand where they cross the line or do the education. So I thought that was good. And then the second thing, I thought this was really good. The intuition is when you get an appeal, you turn it around as quickly as possible. She purposely waits 7 days. So I don't know if you all do that. And her logic was that in 7 days later, they're actually cooled off and able to listen.
Before you send them the denial.
Before you send the denial, or before you have an opportunity. So I don't know if maybe 7 days is the right or wrong But the idea, you know, you wanna respond right away and then almost stokes the fire versus allowing them to cool off and then.
How many of you all have somebody that you can like when you have a response, right, and you get all emotional? Like how many of you like take the time to like have someone read your email? And my wife does that for me. She's a faculty member, so before I berate some faculty member, she's like, hold off, cool down there, buddy, slow down a little bit, you know.
Well, I don't know if this is generational or just good advice, but I'll at least mark it as generational. But the power of picking up the phone versus an email. I can't underestimate that. We had our program operations manager with events. His name is Brent. It's wonderful to be able to say his name. He passed away while he was working with us from a stroke. But Brent taught everyone to pick up the phone. I've always had kind of a rule: if it's 3 emails, you better get on the phone. But it's really, I struggle with it relative to millennials and younger. They don't want to pick up the phone when simple things could be actually communicated in a conversation. And I'm not trying to say that in a biased way, but a phone call can solve so many things. And that human connection, you know, I believe in high tech and high touch. And I think we can't do everything digitally. And so the power of picking up the phone has solved so many problems for us. And I share the 3 email thing. It's like, if you're on your 3rd email, something's wrong. Call.
Just a question, you know, being right on the edge of that generation as well on that. Do you have any like internal text messaging teams, anything of, you know, that direct communication that you can use? Because a lot of younger millennials, Gen X, you know, the groups that you're seeing coming into colleges are much more comfortable communicating that way through a text string, which still has that person-to-person interaction going, not face-to-face, not talking like a lot of us are used to, but it's something that they're super comfortable with that might be a better way of doing that.
Well, I'd say 2 things. Usually when it comes to picking up the phone, it's going to be somebody at a supervisory level versus a frontline staff member. And then that person is really coached to have talking points ready. So they shouldn't cold call. So, and I don't believe, this is just Ann, I don't believe that it should be that frontline staff member if it's gotten to that point. It's like, let's have somebody at another step of escalation. You know, do you feel comfortable making that call? Okay, since it's based on this, let's get some talking points ready and then let's make this happen. So I think that gets folks usually over the hump. And then, you know, we want everybody to be cooled off before the call is made and having talking points and feeling good. And then there's, you know, that old saying of, you know, you can also say, I don't know, I'll get back to you. You know, the power of being able to say, I don't know. I've had whole groups of staff members say that at the beginning of the year. Can we all say together, I don't know, you know, and be okay with that and then get back to folks later.
Well, think about the power of saying, I don't know, promising you're gonna get back to them, and then actually getting back to them.
Oh,
Like doing what
absolutely.
you said you were gonna do, that is the kind of stuff that builds like relationships that matter and trust. Yeah, for sure, go ahead.
Some of the toss A&M under the boat here. I know Lynn's group, you guys have been using texting and chatting for a while, right, for your appeals process?
We use live chat and email.
And you guys have been doing that 6, 7 years, if not longer?
Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
have any in-person appeals. Everything's via email or
Yeah.
information that we receive from them.
And then at my last university, we merged our phone system with our IT department, so they took help desk, and they have all that functionality there that they use. They have the chat, the text, they have all of those built into their Salesforce there, that they utilize that. So I saw Cynthia, you had your hand up?
Yeah.
Yes, we have a person at our office, Mr. Paul Lewis, when we have a citizen that comes in, not even, never have raised it, he's our go-to person. He's been with parking over 30 years, so I think they see like a veteran person, automatic respect, and he has always been able to de-escalate. And if they even send phone calls to him, but they don't come to the lobby, so part of what she said about don't cold call, but their customer service manager, but Paul is 2 years, he's always done it and he still has.
We should all have a Paul.
Here, that's great.
We should all have a Paul. Okay, so we've got 12 minutes. I want to make sure. Are there any burning questions?
Cameron,
From? Oh,
Oh, it was my question, I agree with the phone call, but I always follow up with an email, because people forget really quickly what we
Yeah,
talked about.
yeah.
Always cover your ass with that email.
Absolutely.
Just to reiterate.
Yeah, and many times after the phone call, there still is something we write back. We talked to you, blah, 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 so I'm telling half the story.
yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay. Others? All right. How do you measure customer experience? How do you know you're doing it well? Or what are the feedback channels that you have established besides somebody yelling at you or screaming at you over email? Do you measure it?
So
And what are the measures?
we do a biannual customer survey. We send that out every other year. We get our feedback that way forwardly. Emails come in, so try to answer those. I know other universities or other institutions will also do kind of like the McDonald's or Burger King method, where you give us your feedback in the bottom of every receipt or every communication that you have with them. So some will do that.
And is that an email address that you put on the receipt? Or is it
I
a
would say
website or form?
now we're probably a website. It's probably a Qualtrics survey or SurveyMonkey.
Yeah, okay.
In the past, it would have been an email or a Google form of some sort, or smart sheet form, where you fill in a couple of blocks and that comes into you. But I think for the most part now, you're probably looking at SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics as a pretty simple survey tool.
So your biannual surveys. And?
So we measure number of calls coming in. Customer service measure for us is how many abandoned calls. Customer service measure for us is how long they've been on hold. We measure where we are in terms of the age of our citations. We measure our open Salesforce cases. We measure the age, nature of our Salesforce cases. We measure how many cases are closed by the employees. And we measure how many adjudications our employees are doing in terms of turning over citations. And the employees get that information. Their supervisors get it, but they also get it individually. And they need, I think our employees need to know what does a good day look like? What does winning look like? What does helping the customers look like? And I think it's very powerful. You can't manage what you can't measure. You can't manage it if you're not measuring it.
What do you use to measure? Like the phone calls, and you were saying that, what do you use?
It comes right out of our phone system. How many each salesperson phone calls got, how long their phone calls were, how long our phone calls were on hold, how many phone calls were abandoned, and what hour were they abandoned, because really there should be dynamic scheduling. If our phone calls are being abandoned during when people can call on their lunch hour to get their parking question answered, why don't we have more people on the phones during lunch? So it really helps us be dynamic about how we schedule our people.
So you use the CRM system, right? Salesforce?
We use Salesforce, but we have a VIA on our phones, and so it tracks all our phone data relative to what's happening on the phone system.
Okay. Josh?
We do an annual survey as well, and some of the questions we ask are like even if we wrote you a citation, was the process handled in a professional way, right? Like we're not asking whether you agree or not with the citation, but at the very least, no matter what's happened, is we should have the ability to write a citation a professional way. We should be able to explain to the customer what they did wrong. The appeals process should be handled right. So it's one of those, the customer deserves that professional response, right? So hopefully most can separate and go, yeah, even I didn't like the ticket, but they were nice about the way they went about it, or they handled it in a professional way. I look at that as how you measure, at the end of the day. On one hand I would say, well, if less people bother me, I'm probably right, but I've noticed, like, even on social media, and I was gonna talk about social media, a lot of folks do a lot of cool stuff in marketing. It's a two-way communication thing. You can't just post something on X or Instagram, and if somebody posts something and not ignore it. Now sometimes you have to ignore the atrocious stuff that someone might say or delete it, but like if someone asks a legitimate question, you need to answer them in that platform just the same as you would an email, you know, because there especially lots of people are going to see it, and especially at universities, parents are a powerful group to communicate to, right? It's one thing that we talk about, you know, we're treating kids as adults, but at the end of the day, you know, it's important to still make sure, you know, if a parent asks a question, that all the other parents see the same response that I gave one parent, you know, regarding something, so that way there's no miscommunication about what's happening. Clarifying misinformation is important. I don't know if many of you all are on Reddit, but you know, a lot of students use that as a way to complain about anything, right? And it's one of those, I started going on because people are like, hey, they said something, and as opposed to ignoring it and letting the bad information flow, I'm able to go correct it. And there goes, now, like people tag us, you know, be like, hey, Parky, can you chime in and tell the student what's up? And again, so it's not just, it's more powerful than just one email. I'm getting it across to thousands of people at the same time. Yeah.
Excellent.
I will add for your surveys, sorry, Alan, we interrupt you, is make sure you're having the important questions should be the same so you can get some longitudinal analysis off that.
Okay.
You don't want to keep changing them and like, you know, make it up every month or every week. You can, but keep the same base questions, because then you can create some analytics off of that, some KPIs off of that, and find trends. If you don't ask the same question, it's almost worthless, or you're just going to have a point in time. So just keep that in mind.
Taking somebody's temperature as opposed to measuring it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right.
Oh, sorry, and Heather.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna let Josh know that our phone system's being upgraded to Vonage, and so we will be able to track phone calls, like how long people were on the phone, get drop calls, stuff like that. He does it, because he's the director, so like, you know, like, he's up here, and I'm like,
And I'll say something cool.
I barely even talk to my staff.
I know.
You know?
The cool technology
Some
there
people.
is we're actually doing that with our intercom systems in our lanes. So we're converting to Cisco phone, Cisco's call center. So we're doing that for our customers in the garages now too.
Excellent. Okay. We are coming around the bend here. 5 minutes. There's one thing you can leave the audience with from a customer experience perspective, if you haven't already said it, but like
Candy.
boil it all down.
Candy.
Candy.
We didn't give everybody any candy.
Oh,
Find it.
all right. We'll hand out candy afterwards.
And with that, I will add,
So sorry.
my one piece of advice is empathy. Teach your staff empathy. That goes a long way when you're handling difficult customers. If you can't empathize with them, you're never going to win.
Mine would be parking is the institution's front door and welcome mat.
Yeah, for sure. And you're not gonna get credit for doing it well. It's really just about silence is good, right?
If nobody knows we're there, we're doing our job well.
Yeah, yeah. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, a combination of it. I mean, again, that focus of we're a service to the entire organization, right? And that, the university doesn't exist for us, right? We exist for them. And
Here.
losing that focus, right? I mean, this is all we do, right? But just and I think part of it though also is getting your staff, especially outside of what you do, getting them involved in other organizations. If I can send them to committee meetings where there's people from across, giving them those same opportunities that I had kind of coming up to get to know people across the university, to send somebody to represent you, because they form those same relationships, right? And things like that, and it becomes really important. It gives them career opportunities for one, and supporting them, but it just lets them understand the bigger picture of the entire university versus just being siloed in your job. So.
Yeah, for sure. I have heard that numerous times as well. Taking the opportunity to go outreach and create relationships, because it matters then when it hits the fan and somebody's upset. They'll pick up the phone and call you because they know you, right? Okay, any other good pro tips out there in the crowd? I'm sure these three have good ideas, but maybe you have your own good idea around, a pro tip for managing customer experience at your university or on your campus. Oh, they're asleep. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say one is don't be afraid to ask the customers what they think. When you were talking about customer survey. 3 years ago, we went, all in, and every customer that we contact every day, whether by phone, in person, or online, gets a survey from us. To ask us, like these folks were saying, is how did we treat you, how did we work with you, did you get your question answered, how did you get what you want?
Right.
And our staff were scared as hell when we said we were going this way, because they all had the perception that they were capable. But when we did it, we launched it without the ability to have open comments back to us. But the feedback was so positive, and within 2 weeks, we opened it up for comments back. Every week, we get positive comments that go to our weekly staff meeting. They get to hear specific feedback. Like I said, we've been doing it for over 3 years now. We have a 5-star scale, and every month we refresh it to let them know how they're doing right then. But 3 years in, we're 4.8, 4.85 cumulative. So I mean, it really let them know and change their attitude. And they're not afraid to answer the phone. They're not afraid to work with customers. And it really just reinforced the good work they're doing, because they get that feedback on a regular basis. We still get the negative feedback. But we have an opportunity then to reach out with the questions that they have and follow up with them and get that answer. So it's really helped with our staff and how they feel about the job they're doing.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of let your parking constituents tell you how well you're doing too. So we have this fear of opening the lines of communication for fear that we're gonna get blasted.
Scale of 25. No.
Right? But at the end of the day, somebody actually made me lift a finger. I'm sorry, what did
I
you
said
say?
on a scale of 4 to 5, tell us how we did. No. but you made me think of something though. Also is so much of what we do. Obviously, we come back from a conference like this and we have ideas, but a lot of it is customer. Even the complaints that trigger, and we often talk about, I may not be able to make a change right now, but eventually, is to let your customers know that we did maybe change something or made an improvement based on their feedback, that they're part of that loop. I mean, every year when I start off with student government, they're new to us and they come up their platform, and I'm able to talk about all the things that we've changed over the year, all the things that we've created because of their feedback. So right away they know that we're here to listen and that they can make a difference. And I say, look, you have 10 demands. I'm not going to meet all 10 demands, right? But there's something in there that I probably can do something about, or I can improve it the next year so the next year comes along, and they feel part of that process. And it's kind of cool to point to that and say, yeah, this was a student initiative that led us, otherwise we would have never done it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you all, and Gabe, Josh, for your help. Thank you for the interaction. If I could just put one shameless plug out there. I started producing a podcast about a month and a half ago. It's called Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered. And so I'm half speaking to parking, but I'm also trying to sort of help you get the word out about how hard your job really is, because everybody 1 degree separated from parking, in my experience, is how hard could it be? It's just parking, right? And then you start getting into the issues and the complexity and all of that. So take a listen if you like it, but more importantly, if you have somebody that you think would be a great guest, by all means, get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to schedule them up, and we can go from there. So thank you all for